Aren't you grateful for the weather tonight? We did not have to come in Noah's Ark tonight, so we appreciate everyone being here. We're looking forward to a wonderful evening. As many of you know, Peggy and I just returned from Israel 3 days ago after taking 17 of our students on our 21st tour to the land. So I'm not sure if we have the Jerusalem glow or jet lag. This is our 7th annual Kristallnacht Memorial. The purpose is to remember those who perished in the Holocaust, to honor those who survived, and pledge never again. Our memorial is obviously a very serious evening because of the nature of what we're remembering, but it is not our desire to glorify the death and destruction caused by the Nazis. Instead, we rejoice over life, that good triumphed over evil, and as we mourn the nightmare of the Holocaust, we also celebrate life. I've got good news. Hitler is dead. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. When we make decisions for the Institute for Hebraic Christian Studies, we ask ourselves 2 questions. These questions might be kind of strange coming from a Christian for some of you to hear. First question, is this good for the Jews? And the second question, is this good for the Christians? And if we don't get a yes to both of those questions, then it's not for us to be doing. Having an annual Kristallnacht where we come together like this is good for the Jews and it's good for the Christians. So we want to give a special thank you to Rabbi David Rosen for hosting us here this evening as he did last year. We're so grateful for the people of Congregation Beth Yeshurun to allow us to be here. The only thing that I would say is we don't have enough people here. Next time we need to have several thousand. But I want to thank all of you for coming here. We're grateful for Cantor Propus, who is going to lead us in some music presentation this evening. Want to express and recognize our appreciation to Consul General of Israel, who has come to light candles with us tonight. Could you give a warm welcome to Consul General Yael Ravia Zadok? Yael, would you stand, please? Come on now. Thank you so much, Yael, for being here. She honored us last year also. We're pleased and honored to welcome our guest speaker and candle lighters and all of the people who made this evening possible. We would say, Toda Rabbah, thank you very much. We also want to express our appreciation to Gene and Joe Samuels for using the pages of the Jewish Herald Voice to help bring Jews and Christians together in these challenging times. We want to honor the survivors this evening who had the courage to share their stories, and by doing so, give a human face to the Holocaust. Our past speakers, I notice many of them are here tonight: Leah Weems, Ruth Steinfeld, Walter Case, Leon Cooper, Helen Coland, and Wolf Finkelman. I also want to recognize Larry Steinfeld, who coordinates our tours to Holocaust Museum Houston. And I noticed that there are a good number of survivors who have come tonight. And I'd ask all of the survivors if you would please stand so we could give you a warm welcome. On a practical note, if you'll note in your program that we did not have an admission fee for this meeting, but if you would be able to support us financially to help us pay for the cost of this event tonight, we would be grateful. You can make a check to IHCS, and there will be some folks at the exit doors with some buckets for you to put your donations and contributions in, and we appreciate that very much. Everyone should have gotten a little pin. I'm wearing mine here. It's called Never Again, and we made that just for these Kristallnacht events. The design, it's black on the backdrop of it as a reminder of the blackness and darkness of the soul of the Nazis and the Holocaust. But the words Never Again are in gold, which speaks of Jerusalem of gold and tells us of the great victory that the Jewish people had over the Nazis. So we hope you'll be wearing that around town. My pledge and commitment is every time I have some kind of jacket on, I will be wearing this pin for the rest of my life to help our survivor friends bear witness that never again will we sit idly by whenever and wherever there is anti-Semitism. We have a tragic history from which Christians need to repent, but we're living in a new season where like-minded Christians and Jews are discovering one another. And we know whenever there's a paradigm shift between people groups, there's a natural and understandable caution as those who have been alienated seek to become friends. Speaking on behalf of millions of Christians around the world and thousands in the Houston area, I say to our Jewish friends tonight, you are not alone. Bible-believing Christian Zionists are your best friends. We're not going to go away, and we will never forsake you or let you down. In the challenging days ahead, we will stand unwavering as one with our Jewish friends and consider any attack against you, against us as well. We will not only weep with you in difficult times like this memorial this evening, but also rejoice with you in good times. We will not only support you with our words, but also with our deeds, our mitzvahs, our mitzvots. This new emerging relationship between Christian Zionists and Jewish people is a relationship like a newborn. It must be nurtured, and it must be protected, and absolutely nothing can or must be allowed to separate us. There's a saying in the Middle East that most of you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. There are many reasons why Jews and Christians need to be friends. One that stands out today is we have a common enemy. We don't have to be in Israel very long to hear the radical Islamic chant, today we fight the Saturday people, tomorrow the Sunday people. As Jews and Christians reach out to one another, we experience the normal human challenges relating to trust, it's understandable, judging or misjudging one another's motives, learning to communicate with sensitivity and respect, and other relationship issues. We're all going to make mistakes along the way, but we must not let these challenges deter us. The consequences of remaining separated are much greater than the risk of being united. And it's our prayer that this kind of gathering this evening can help unite us. With that in mind, I wanted to ask all the Christians who are here tonight, would you stand, please? All the Christians who are here. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your support. And now it's my great privilege to welcome my dear friend, Rabbi David Rosen, who's going to come and greet you and give the invocation. Rabbi Rosen.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Congregation Beth Yeshurun, your partner in this beautiful celebration of friendship and faith. Tonight, please allow me to begin our proceedings with a prayer. Our God in heaven, tonight we are gathered, Jews and Christians alike, to remember that night more than 6 decades ago, when a different kind of rain fell upon Germany, a rain of terror. On that night called Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, thousands of synagogues and Jewish businesses went up in flames as the forces of anti-Semitism and hatred were unleashed across what had always been one of Europe's most civilized and cultured nations. These were the forces that would anticipate and define one of the darkest chapters in human history, what would become known as the Holocaust. Dear God, what horrific years those were, years of pain and suffering and sorrow. But tonight, O God, we have gathered to remember that sorrowful night, not with hearts filled with anger, but hearts filled with hope. And to do so not only as Jews, but as Jews and Christians, and together to pledge that never again will such a thing be allowed to happen unchallenged anywhere on this planet. We pledge to be there for each other as partners in faith, as partners in the belief of the one God. You, O God, never want your name to be sullied, and your name will never be sullied and desecrated by broken glass, by hatred and evil again. Tonight we gather together as an act of love to embrace one another as your children, to draw strength from each other as together we reflect and recall, and as we promise to build a cathedral of peace on the ashes of Kristallnacht. Give us courage and give us strength and give us the tools we will need, O Lord, to lift our voices and united bring a great peace to this world in the words of our Hebrew prayers. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed v'rachamim. O Lord, give us peace, a good peace, rich with blessing and grace and compassion and mercy. And may this peace rain down upon all the inhabitants of your world. Amen.
Would you please stand for the call to unity and blessing?
חסך אבוא ביתך אשתחווה לך קודשך ביראתך מה טוב אוהליך יעקב משכנותיך ישראל מה טוב אוהליך יעקב משכנותיך ישראל הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד הנה מה טוב ומה נעים שבת אחים גם יחד
Oh, please take a seat if you would. We're going to begin part of our candle lighting now. David, thank you so much. Those beautiful songs. This wall of remembrance here on the right, it's too long of a story to go into it, but we're so grateful that a man in Pennsylvania made this for us. In October 1938, the Nazis expelled thousands of Polish Jews who were living in Germany. Poland did not accept them, so the people were left in a no man's land, barely surviving under the harshest of conditions in a Polish camp. 17-year-old German-born Polish Jew was in Paris at the time and learned that his parents were in the camp. The young man, understandably so, became very angry and went to the German embassy in Paris with the intent of killing the German ambassador. Instead of killing the ambassador, he shot Ernst von Roth, who was the third secretary to the ambassador. This was on November 7, 1938. The secretary died 2 days later on November 9. Well, the Nazis were waiting for such an instant to justify an action against the Jews. Hitler gave his stormtroopers a free hand against the Jewish people, and when von Roth died on November 9, they went on a rampage of terror and destruction. Approximately 250 synagogues were set on fire, 850 shops destroyed, and several hundred houses destroyed, and 30,000 Jewish men were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. This action against the Jews came to be known as Kristallnacht in German, meaning the night of broken glass, because the streets were filled with broken glass from the shops and synagogues which the Nazis had destroyed. For many people, this tragic event, unfortunately, is only a footnote in the history books, but not so for those who lived through that horrible experience. They will never forget, and neither should we. We all have heard the line that people who forget history or don't know history will eventually repeat it. Those of us who are Christians need this understanding so we can stand with our Jewish friends and say, never again. This is why we're having this special event this evening. At this time, we want to light the candles here on the IHCS Wall of Remembrance. This Wall of Remembrance has very significant place names carved in it, both in Hebrew and in English, along with the Star of David and the place for lighting a candle. The Nazis had hundreds of death camps and killing fields, and of course we couldn't put all of them on the wall, but these represent the many that we could not get on the wall. And so our candle lighting assistants will come now if they would, and please prepare for assisting in the candle lighting of the Wall of Remembrance. For many of you who are here tonight who were in the Holocaust, you will find probably the names of some of your camps here on the wall. It's our way of honoring you this evening. Now at this time, Consul General of Israel, Yael Ravia Zadok, and Peggy Booker will come and light these candles. As they do, I'll read a few of the place names for you. These names, when we hear them, they send horror into our souls. Auschwitz, more than 1 million men, women, and children were murdered inside the gates of Auschwitz. Babi Yar, just outside of Kiev, where on 2 days, September 29 and September 30, 1941, German special killing units murdered over 33,000 Jews just in 2 days. Over the next few months, they murdered over 100,000 Jews at the Babi Yar ravine. Bergen-Belsen is best known probably because this is the camp where Anne Frank died. Buchenwald, there's a number of Dachau. Who can hear that name without feeling a sense of sadness and sickness in your soul? Kovno, many other names here that are on the wall. Minsk, Sobibor was a killing center. Terezin, Treblinka, one of the most notorious of the Nazi killing centers. Over 870,000 men, women, and children were murdered at Treblinka. Warsaw is listed, and others. And so as we light these candles, it's our commitment to our Jewish friends to stand with you and say never again. Every year at Kristallnacht, we have the great honor of presenting a small gift to the Holocaust Museum here in Houston on behalf of our speaker and his or her family that perished in the Holocaust. We're so honored and blessed this evening that Al Marks has come to be our speaker. And in the name of his family and honor his family, Joel Spera, who is the new chairman of the board of the Holocaust Museum, has taken time out of his busy schedule. Joel, would you come up now? And could we give him a warm welcome as he comes? Joel, we have this small token gift here that we want to give to the museum in honor of Al Mark's family, and it's $1,000 as a way of honoring Al's family, and it's our privilege and honor. Wish it had more zeros on it, but we're grateful. We're grateful to be able to present this to you in Al's family name.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Can I say a word?
Please do.
Okay. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Holocaust Museum Houston, it is my profound privilege to accept this check from our dear friends, Dr. Richard and Peggy Booker, and to the entire Institute of Hebraic Christian Studies. We are delighted you have chosen to honor Jews in general and the Holocaust Museum in particular with your generosity, and may we all be the beneficiaries of such warm, loving thoughts. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you. Public speaking is not nice. Thank you.
What a joy and privilege it is to be here with each of you this evening. And I want to thank all of you for coming. I know everybody has so many busy schedules, but I do appreciate it. And just want to say again on our behalf and the Institute for Hebraic Christian Studies, how honored we are to be able to have such an event. And again, Rabbi David Rosen, thank you so much for opening Congregation Beth Yeshurun to us. It's my joy and my privilege to introduce to you this evening our speaker, Al Marks. Richard and I had the pleasure of meeting he and Sarah a month or two back, and just enjoyed meeting and visiting with them so much. I'm not going to take the time to say very much about him because he's going to be telling you his story. One thing he did ask, and I know that you would understand without me even having to say so, and I've often thought of this each time as each of our survivors has taken the time to tell their story, how it opens up something that's still very much a part of them. And Al just said, if you would please bear with him, because as he tells his story, he can become very emotional, and he hopes you will understand. And I know that you would. Before he comes, I would like to ask Sarah if she would stand. This is his wife of 50 years. And I believe you have a daughter. If there is other family, if you would stand also to be recognized. Thank you for coming. And again, I present to you this evening our speaker, Al Marks.
I'm deeply touched. It's a real privilege to be here. A few years ago, I received a telephone call from the Texas City High School, and a wonderful lady by the name of Miss Holm was teaching the Holocaust to her students. And she was teaching it with a passion and with dedication second to none. And she asked me if I would go down and talk to her students. Needless to say, I said, yes, I'd be happy to, but I need you to do me a favor. Stand by me because I may need you. If I get too emotional, I hand you something to read until I get back to norm. And for the next 4 years, Miss Holmes stood there, and a few times I used her. One reason it didn't take me long to say yes to her, because a few years prior to that, I attended a Holocaust lecture. Why would a Holocaust survivor want to go to a lecture? Because I had a colleague, a very prominent local musician, who was a good friend and a very nice man, but he just did not believe in the Holocaust. And he continuously tried to get me talk about it. And finally, one day I said, do me a favor, just one small favor. I am asked to attend a lecture by a delightful speaker. Would you go with me? And finally he decided he would. And the evening came and I went, but my dear friend didn't show. And later he didn't even bother to tell me why he didn't show. But I stayed there. And I'm glad I stayed, because that lecture left me with a lasting impression. And I thought, what could be more appropriate that I would start tonight the way the speaker, and I'm going to call him the professor because he was the professor of a great college. I'm going to start the way he finished. He came to this country after the war, after the concentration camp. He finished his education, and he became a very prominent professor in a college. And this particular year, the college selected him to represent the school in Germany and give lecture in science, his field. And one day, on the way to his lecture, he had to change trains, transfer from one train to another train, and he got off in a medium-sized German town, beautiful sunny day, and came the announcement, the connecting train gonna be an hour late because of mechanical difficulties. And he welcomed that delay. It gave him a chance to go over to that coffee shop and have a cup of coffee and look over his notes. And he grabbed the last table because being the train late, everybody sat down. When he noticed a well-dressed gentleman, distinguished looking, with a cane, looking for a place to sit. And the professor, being a gentleman he was, asked him to join him. And the gentleman graciously accepted it, sat down, and they got involved in a beautiful, highly intellectual conversation. It's almost like two old friends meet after years. But all good things must come to an end, and the announcement came that in a few minutes, after a freight train gonna pull through the station, that train gonna come. And they got up, and they paid for their coffee, and started to walk toward the track when a freight train came through. The freight train with all the cattle cars. And the professor noticed that his friend's face expression totally changed. And after a few minutes, he looked at the professor and he said, "My dear friend, do you see that train?" He says, "Yes." He says, "These are the kind of wagons I accompanied to take the Jews to the gas chamber." And for a minute, the professor was speechless. And then he looked at him, and he says, "Yes, I recognize that train. You see, the train you escorted, I was in one of these wagons as a passenger." And then the professor, who was standing at the podium, looked at us, and he said, we looked at each other, and he looked at me, and he knew who I was. And I looked at him, and I knew who he was. And without saying another word, he left the podium. That sentence left me with a lasting impression. And when Dr. Booker called me and gave me the honor to be tonight, I said, yeah, this is the way I want to start. We got to remember not to forget. Got to remember not to forget. I'm not going to waste too much time talk about World War I because this is history you all know of. In 1933, you know, Adolf Hitler came to power. And one of Hitler's favorite slogans was, the Jews had all the money. And that was very hard for me to understand because at that time I was a kid in Budapest, Hungary. And we lived in a very poor subdivision, the 7th district. It was so rough and so poor that they actually called that subdivision Chicago. Really. And then when I heard that the Hitler said the Jews had all the money. See, my father was a porter at the East Station in Budapest, and we worked for $3 a day carrying the luggages for the well-to-do people who came in on the Orient Express every day at 12 o'clock. Yeah, he was the real Jew. Hitler evidently didn't know the Walton family either. He probably would have had a totally different story. Us Hungarian Jews were so much luckier for a while than our brothers in Poland and every place else. History still talk about, and they did not come to a judgment, but allegedly our Chancellor, Admiral Horthy, was trying to save the Jews. He partially succeeded for a while, because at the very beginning, all the Jews were taken from the countryside, outside the city limit. But the people in the city were put in ghettos, and later on, because of the Swedish diplomat Wallenberg, many of them were saved. But sadly, we lived at that time outside the city limit, and one early morning, the posse, the local sheriff, came by and said, "Get your toothbrush and close the door, you'll be back later." He knew very well that we will not be back, but we didn't know it. And then came the trip to Auschwitz. And the doors opened up early in the morning, and the big searchlights. We had no idea where we were or why we were there. And there was the SS officer. I found out later was Dr. Mengele. Dr. Mengele was a medical doctor who went to medical school to learn how to save lives. What he practiced in his medicine, how to send people to the gas chamber. My biggest heartbreak that I never had a chance to even kiss and hug my parents before they were sent to the other side. We were in Birkenau 2-3 days. Again, the freight train, and then we went to a place called Mauthausen. Now these camps I am mentioning, they were all labor camps. They were not as notorious, and very few people sometimes even heard about them, like Dachau or Bergen-Belsen or those places. But the people who were sent there, they were sent there to work until they die. The German men at that time were fighting, and they needed the slave labor to do the job we were doing. From Mauthausen, they sent us to a place called Melk. Melk is where I spent the longest period. What we were doing in Melk is building a tunnel. The tunnel was designed. It was designed to put in the rocket, the secret weapon to win the war. Thank the Lord that Werner von Braun didn't finish the job. It was brutal work, and there was no way out. And I've been asked many times, you were only in a camp for a year. And my answer is very simple. In any concentration camp, one day is like being on a death row in Huntsville, because we were told daily that no one will ever leave the camp alive. On July 8, 1944, Melk was bombed by the American Air Force on the way to Vienna by mistake. Evidently, our intelligence wasn't as good that time as it is now. Quote. We were bombed, and in less than 2 minutes, until the Air Force found out it was a mistake, we lost 600 people. I had a little blood on my chest. Who would pay attention to a little blood on your chest when you had arms and legs around you? And I didn't know till after the war, when an X-ray technician screamed, "You have a hole in your lung," that it wasn't a hole, but a piece of a bomb, which I still carry. The two most brutal things I can remember in Melk, and this is quite graphic, that we had to watch executions. And this is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. 2 prisoners tried to escape, and they were executed, and we had to watch it. Allegedly, 2 Polish prisoners escaped from Auschwitz, and one of them ended up in the Vatican. And they found deaf ears to their plea, "Help us." Strangely, at that time, most of the inmates in the concentration camps weren't even Jews. You know, at the very beginning, they were the Jehovah's Witnesses, they were the political prisoners, they were the gypsies, they were the gays. The Jews came later. And a little later, when I want to give you some ammunition what to say if people talk to you about a Holocaust. But anyway, the end of April, or the middle of April in 1945, the Russians were coming from the east, and they put us on barges, and they sent us to a town called Linz, and from Linz to Ebensee, that was a death march. 3 days walking, and whoever could not walk, they were shot by the roadside. We arrived to Ebensee, and there was the big gate, and it said in German, "Arbeit macht frei." Work liberates you. In reality, work there killed you, because there was no anticipated liberation. We got to Ebensee, and we found 14,000 skeletons, ghosts. The bodies were lined up because the crematory couldn't bury them. The smell was horrible. There was no more work in the tunnel because there was a total chaos. And then a day before liberation, the German commandant assembled us, and he gave a speech. And he said, "The American army is nearby, and we're going to fight them back, but we want to be sure we save you, so we need everybody to go into the tunnel." And the camp elders said no, because they knew that the tunnel means instant death. And we found out, yes, they had a truck parked by the opening with all the ammunition to blow up the beginning of the tunnel. So we refused because we felt that they may not have even enough time, enough ammunition to finish us up. And that night, we looked out, and the other side of the barbed wire, we saw civilian guards. And that was the first ray of hope. But we still weren't sure, because we thought, what if they went after to get some reinforcement to finish us up? We couldn't close our eyes that night. What's going to happen tomorrow? And there comes the part when I probably have to take out my handkerchief. Because next morning at about 11 o'clock, a tank came through the door, to the gate. The tank was driven by an angel on earth by the name of Bob Persinger and his colleague. And he was followed by 5 jeeps. And that was the liberation. And people ask me so many times, could you describe how it felt to be liberated? Dear friends, there are no words in the English language or in any language we could tell you the feeling. There are just no words. So, sadly, so many people died after liberation because their body couldn't handle the food. Just recently, you may watch TV about this magician somewhere in England who started for 40 days and he was told, you can't eat because you're going to die. That's what happened to so many of my dear friends. I stayed in a camp 2-3 weeks, and then I got on a freight train and I went home to find my family. It didn't take me long to find out that they were not there. I came back, stayed in a displaced person camp, and after applying for my papers, I had a glorious day arriving to New York in November 1947. I was fortunate, and I asked the committee who helped me to come to this country if they could send me anyplace else but the big city of New York. And thank God, I ended up in Houston. I never heard of Houston before. In 1952, during the Korean conflict, I was drafted. I served 2 years. I came out as Corporal L. Marks, and later on the governor of Kentucky made me Colonel L. Marks, which I never used. One of the most glorious days was after I came back. Bear with me. To marry my high school sweetheart, who's as beautiful today as she was 50 years ago. But I had one dream all these years, and nothing was more important. I must admit to you, because of my profession, I was exposed to some very exciting days in my music business. Played the Apollo 17 astronauts when they came back to the moon, played for the president, things like that. But the most exciting day was I wanted to find my liberators. And one afternoon, about 10 years ago, I got on the computer. And I hate computers. I really do. I feel as the worst thing ever happened to us, except it did one thing for me. I put in Ebensee, and a picture came up of the camp with 30-some prisoners after liberation. And way back in the very back row, I looked at myself, and there was a name, Ernie Seibel, Lieutenant, and a telephone number. And before I turned the computer off, I went to the phone, and I made the longest and most expensive long-distance phone call I ever made, because Ernie and I were on the phone for 2 hours. And Ernie said, next month we have our yearly meeting, and Bob Persinger will be there. And he said, would you come? And I said, Ernie, I would be there if I would have to walk to Detroit. I didn't have to walk. We flew up. And I remember the line a while ago when the professor said, I looked at him and he looked at me, and he knew who I was and I knew who he was. And when I walked into that hotel in Detroit, loaded with people in the lobby, There was a tall man standing, waiting for me. That was Bob Persinger, the man who liberated me. And two grown men with tears in their eyes were hugging and then spent the rest of the day talking, looking at pictures. That's how I found my liberators. So, when I listened to Dr. Booker, he said something very unique. He says we got to focus now on some good things. So before I finish with a beautiful human story, let me just share with you a couple of my ideas how we can maybe avoid a future Holocaust. Dear Christian brothers who are here, you must remember one thing. The last Holocaust started with Christians and ended up with Jews. It is my firm belief, and like I said, it is my belief and not an official from anyone else. It is my firm belief, if once again a Holocaust would happen, it would start with the Jews, but it would not end up with the Jews. Because after Jews, somebody else have to be the scapegoat. So, the key word, what we have to remember, is involvement. We got to be involved. We got to talk to our kids. We got to make a point that our children would go to the Holocaust Museum. In your church, in your synagogue, in your service clubs like the Rotary, the Lions. Ask for a speaker sometimes. Miss Myers at the Holocaust Museum would be delighted to send somebody out. If she doesn't have anybody, you can call me day or night. And whether it's 2 people or 2,000 people, we will be there and we talk to them. But now, I would like to end up with a truly tearjerker. A story which tells you there are miracles around us every day. Sarah and I were blessed with a handicapped child after 2 beautiful, talented girls. And how can you say blessed? How can somebody be blessed with a handicapped child? Well, the good Lord up there, and that goes addressed to all your ministers and the rabbi, the good Lord up there has some funny way to work things out. David, who was born with a mental deficiency, we never thought the day would come that we could enjoy him as much as we are enjoying him today. And we never knew that indirectly, someday, hundreds of hungry people, old people, gonna have a meal, and they're not gonna be hungry because of David. And my wonderful friend, Joe Samuels, who's sitting here, he knows that story. He knows what I'm referring to. But anyway, at that time, when this episode took place, the sky was black. And David was in a children's ward in the Austin State Hospital. He had tremendous psychological problems. And we had a chance to see him once a month for 15 minutes. And this particular month, it was December, just before Christmas, we had a phone call. And we were told that we can only see him for 3 minutes. They had some problems at the unit, and the children can only be seen at 11 o'clock for 3 minutes, and if you're not there at 11 o'clock, you won't see him. Now you may think that it's insignificant, but for a child who knows who you are, and we were his life, I knew that we have to be there at 11 o'clock. I told Sarah we're going to leave at 6 o'clock to make the 5-hour trip to Austin because it only takes 3 hours. Be sure we get there. It was raining, and after we passed the little town of Brookshire, if any of you ever drives to San Antonio, you know on the left-hand side is a park, a roadside park. And that's the only place where you turn to the left to the roadside park. And we had to stop. I couldn't keep my eyes open. I said, I close my eyes for 10 minutes, then we go. And we pulled down, and I closed my eyes. In 10 minutes, when I opened my eyes and I turned the key, and the car wouldn't start. And I had cars and people all around me. And I went begging, please help me, I have to get to Austin. And we found deaf ears. You know, just like the guy who went to Rome and found deaf ears. Nobody, all those new cars, the Cadillacs, the SUVs, whatever, they didn't respond. And I was in terror. I have to get to Austin. And then came the miracle. A car pulled up. I cannot even describe that car. It was like a garbage sedan. The door was tied to the frame with rope. The back seat was loaded with pots and pans and blankets and dirt. A little bearded old hobo type of man was sitting on the passenger side, and a little skinny lady was driving. And a little hobo looked at me, and he says, "Can I help you, son?" And when he called me son, I liked him immediately. And I said, "I don't know what you can do, but anything you can do will be appreciated." And he says, "Well, let me get out." It took him a couple of minutes to get out. See, after he got out, I realized he only had one leg. And he pulled his crutch, and he asked me to open the hood, and he informed me, "I'm sorry, I can't start you, but one thing I can do, if you don't mind to climb in the back, we'll find a station, somebody who would help you." And I went with him, and we probably passed 4 or 5 closed stations until we found one open. And on our way to the station, he mentioned that he's in a VA hospital and he's going home with his wife to see his children. I wanted to give him money. He wouldn't take it. And I told him, "You know, you want me to have a nice Christmas. And if you don't take this money, I won't have a nice Christmas." Finally, he took it. And the station helped me out. And I got in a car, and I broke every speeding record. And if there's any highway patrolman here, I hope you don't find me. And 3 minutes before 11 o'clock, we drove up to the children's ward to a smiling and crying and happy David. And my wife, who sits there, she knows that story. Now, why did I share this story with you? What does it have to do with the Holocaust? One word, my dear friends, just one word. Involvement. That man got involved. And while all the others who sat there didn't even open the window, didn't ask me, what's wrong? He got involved. And today, if I could talk to him, I would tell him, "Nick," I call him Nick because it happened before Christmas. I would tell him, "Nick, you know, maybe you never had more than $20 in your pocket. And maybe you didn't build 7 castles in Colorado on a borrowed money from your employees. And maybe I would tell the little old lady, that dear lady, maybe you never been a TV diva, and maybe you never sold $500 million worth to Kmart. But you went home to your children who loved you and adored you." And my dear friends, this is what life is all about. And I thank you so much for allowing me to be with you.
Now, Al mentioned a gentleman several times by the name of Bob Persinger. Bob and his wife Arlene live in Illinois. And when Bob was a young tank commander at 20 years old in the 3rd Army F Company, on May 6, 1945, as Al has said, Bob was the first liberator to drive his tank into Al's camp. And what Bob saw would make an impression on him forever. We're so excited that Bob and Arlene have taken time out of their schedule to come from Illinois to be with us tonight. Bob, would you come up here? Where are you, Bob? Now, Bob has a few words, too, he wants to share, so if you'd take a seat while they're greeting each other. Isn't this wonderful? Everything has to wait for hugs, you know. Hugs are the priority. Bob, you want to come up here with Al and just say a few words to the people on your impressions when you drove that tank? We were just with our tank command friends in Israel. If you would just come on up here, Al, if you would just say a few words.
Thank you. What an evening. Yes, I have an article here that I wrote this story in the history of our unit. A few years ago, we published a book, and it's called The 150-Year Saga of the 3rd Cavalry. And the war, you know, in Europe was nearing the end of May 6, 1945. And this is what I put in our book. There's a brief story. F Company, the tank company of the 3rd Cavalry, arrived in Ebensee, Austria, a beautiful, beautiful little village in the Alp Mountains with a beautiful lake. And we were told that there was a concentration camp nearby. And I was given the assignment to take my tank and another tank to the gates and enter the camp with our 2 tanks. We did so with no resistance. However, the sights were unbelievable. There were an estimated 14,000 prisoners within the camp. They were skeleton-like figures, weighing perhaps around 70 pounds. Many lay dead within their barracks and out on the grounds. The crematorium had piles of bodies waiting to be cremated. The stench of the rotting bodies was sickening and almost unbearable. The sight of these people being treated like this brought undescribable feelings within us and tears to our eyes as we saw what these people were enduring. It was obvious that they had to have some food. We started to collect from the surrounding area of Ebensee, and as soup was prepared, and served the following day. It had been so long since they had eaten any nourishing food that their digestive system was unable to digest the food. Consequently, many became sick and died. Now the Army moved in with hospital units and we set up and we saved to save hundreds of lives and start them on the return to health. For us who saw this, Ebensee was something we would never forget as long as we live. That was my story in this book that we had published. And I was so glad to meet Al, as he said, in Detroit in 1998. And Al came back to our reunion in Louisville, Kentucky in 2000. What a wonderful man. He entertained us. He's such a musician. We just grew to love him. Thanks, Al. I get to see you once more.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are the real heroes in our country. I also should mention that Bob's colleague, Dick Pamanti.
Yes,
Dick was his teammate, and a few weeks before I met the group, he passed away. His wife was at the meeting, and I went up to her, and needless to say, I broke down. But at least I had a chance to tell her what her husband did for me. They are wonderful people. Please give them a big hand.
We're leaving tomorrow. What time?
Thank you, Bob and Al. We're going to have a wonderful shofar presentation of the Holocaust with our dear shofar minister, Randy Spencer. And we're going to slip down off the podium so we can see. And once we can get down, we'll dim the lights for the shofar presentation. After that, our dear friends from the Jewish and Christian communities come to light these candles with us, and we'll move right on with the program. So Dave, we'll go ahead and get down now so we can, as soon as we get down, if you can lower the lights for us.
לפניכם את מגילת היסוד של מדינת ישראל, אשר אושרה בקריאה ראשונה על ידי מועצת העם. בארץ ישראל קם העם היהודי, בה עוצבה דמותו הרוחנית, הדתית והמדינית, בה חי חיי קוממיות ממלכתית, בה יצר נכסי תרבות לאומיים וכלל אנושיים, והוריש לעולם כולו את ספר הספרים הנצחי. לאחר שהוגלה העם מארצו בכוח הזרוע, שמר לו אמונים בכל ארצות פזוריו, ולא חדל מתפילה ומתקווה לשוב לארצו ולחדש בתוכה את חירותו המדינית. מתוך קשר היסטורי ומסורתי זה,
of appreciation. There are no human words to describe the horror of the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were systematically slaughtered by the Nazis simply because they were Jews. Very difficult to understand the enormity of the number 6 million. This might help us, using this illustration, consider in a little more than 5 years that every man, woman, and child is murdered in Wyoming, Alaska, Vermont, District of Columbia, Delaware, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, and Rhode Island. And that's about 6 million people. It's also estimated about 5 million non-Jews perished at the hands of the Nazis. While this unimaginable horror was taking place, there was very little protest from the nations and, unfortunately, the Christian world. But for the Christians who are here tonight and millions around the world, we say to our Jewish friends, never again. Never again will we sit idly by whenever and wherever there is anti-Semitism. We who love the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, in the spirit of Ruth in the Hebrew Bible, we've joined our destiny to you. Your people have become our people, and your God has become our God. All that we have as Christians, we owe to the Jewish people, and we will stand with you and consider any evil intent or action against you as being against us as well. And what Al said earlier was absolutely right. So tonight we're going to light these candles here, 6 for the 6 million Jewish people who perished, and 5 for the 5 million non-Jewish people who perished. and then one unity candle to symbolize our desire to bless and comfort and mourn with our Jewish friends in sad times and rejoice with you in good times. We're honored that so many wonderful friends from both the Jewish and Christian communities have come tonight to light candles with us. And I'm going to make just a very short statement about each candle, and then my dear colleague Janice Sturkey, who has helped organize all this candle lighting, will call the names of those who will light the candles. And as these candles are being lit, may we make a new commitment to be lights of faith and hope and love in this troubled world that we live in. So if our candle lighting assistants will come and take their place now, we'll make ourselves ready. First, we're going to light this first candle in honor of all the men who perished, the old and the sick who were immediately killed, and the young and healthy who were worked to death, as well as those who were executed in the killing fields. And on their behalf we say,
never again. We've invited Lee Wunsch, CEO of the Jewish Federation of Houston, Milton Frankfurt, Chairman of the Federation Board of Trustees, and Melinda and Pastor Joe Martinez to come and light this first candle.
We light the second candle in honor of all the women who perished, the mothers who died with their children in their arms, and those who risk all to bring new life into the camps. Can you imagine having a baby in one of these camps? And the incredible, horrible choice that some mothers had to make to choose the life of one child over another, or their own life over their child's life. On their behalf we say,
never again. Susan Lannis Myers, the director of the Holocaust Museum Houston, will come and light the candle for the Jewish community, and Phyllis Cantrell with the Jewish Herald Voice and a great friend of IHCS on the board will light the second candle.
we light the third candle this evening in honor of the 1.5 million innocent children, brutally but purposefully murdered, their young lives taken away before they ever had a chance to live them. On their behalf, we say,
never again. Leah Weems and Ruth Steinfeld, we've adopted them at IHCS, our favorite sisters. The Houston Council of Jewish Holocaust Survivors will come for the Jewish community. And Sherry and Ed Addicks with IHCS in Brenham and their daughter Anna will come forth and light the candle for the Christian community.
One thing about being in this job, you get to hug a lot of people. We light the fourth candle in honor of the heroes of resistance who bravely fought the Nazis against all odds. Although they knew they were doomed to perish in their struggle, they fought on the side of righteousness and gave many hope that evil could be resisted. On their behalf, we say,
never again. Jean Samuels, please come forward with the Jewish Herald Voice, and she will be lighting for the Jewish community. And Gay and Pastor Jim Way from the Remnant Church will light the fourth candle representing the Christian community. And we don't want to forget Joe Samuels, who's sitting on the front row.
We light the fifth candle in honor of the righteous Gentiles who risked their lives and the lives of their families to save Jewish lives. I'm sure you've been to the Avenue of the Righteous Gentiles at Yad Vashem. And by their deeds proved their faith was genuine. On their behalf, we say,
never again. Golda and Gil Baker, the AFP group, come and light the candle for the Jewish community, and Pastor Gladys and Ivan Seahorn with GPS Ministries will light for the Christian community.
We light the sixth of the Jewish candles to honor the Jewish survivors. And we have so many this evening. We're so grateful that you came tonight. Who lived through the nightmare and began a new life. You know, these survivors are so amazing. All that they went through, that they could have a normal life and be so productive in our world is truly amazing. Those who have found the courage to share their deep pain with us, and those not able to bear witness because the memories have just been too painful. On their behalf, we say,
never again. Lighting the sixth candle, we have Sandra and Steve Finkelman of Scope Imports. And there are 6 candles on the Jewish side for the 6 million that perished, and only 5 on the Christian side. But we've asked Alice and Dr. Frank Lanza to come from the Christian community who've been so supportive of Israel and stand with the Finkelmans as they light the 6th candle.
We light the unity candle, finally, to symbolize our desire for Jews and righteous Gentiles to stand with one another for the cause of justice and to fight hatred and prejudice whenever and wherever it is found.
Rabbi David Rosen of Congregation Beth Yeshurun and Dr. Richard Booker, founder and director of IHCS, will light the unity candle. And let's all stand as a show of unity.
This concludes our candle lighting part of the service. If you would take a seat, please, for a few more moments, and let us join our hearts with Rabbi Rosen as he comes now and leads us in saying Kaddish.
The Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, is an ancient Jewish prayer glorifying God, Hashem, in times of mourning and distress. Together we recite this prayer as an expression of our faith in the Almighty and His ability to take our burdens and comfort us as we mourn the loss of those murdered in the Holocaust. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah v'alma divrach erutei v'yamlik malchutei v'chayechon u'vyomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, b'agala u'v'zman kari v'imeru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach Leolam U'Lalmei Almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei Dekudesha B'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'imeru, Amen. Yehei Shalama Rabbah min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru, Amen. Oseh Shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh Shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru, Amen. May be seated.
מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו, הגן, הגן עליה, בעברת, בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה, עליה, סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך ואמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויוצאיה, ותגנם בעצה טובה, בעצה טובה מלפניך. אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Avinu Shebashamayim, deliver them and crown their efforts with triumph. Avinu Shebashamayim, Zur Yisrael v'goalo. Bless our land with peace, O God, and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen, Amen. Avinu Shebashamayim, Tzur Abschied smichat geplatte. Again aleha. Bevrat chastecha. Uferos aleha. Sukkot shalom lecha. Velomar amen.
Just coming back from the land and hearing Cantor Propus sing that helps me appreciate a statement by a rabbi many centuries ago. His lamentation was, "My body's in the west, but my heart is in the east." And I know all of us tonight who love the land of Israel would agree with that statement. Thank you, Cantor Propus. Many Christians may not have had the opportunity to study church history or be aware of the atrocities done to the Jewish people in the name of Christianity. But because church history is our history, good or bad, we're linked to our past. When Ezra and Daniel in the Hebrew Bible realized the corporate consequences of Israel's sins, they were wise and humble enough to understand the need to stand in the gap for the nation through prayer, repentance, and intercession, even though they themselves had not personally committed the sins that grieved the Lord. Tonight, those of us here who are Christians have the same opportunity to stand in the gap for the past sins of the church against the Jewish people and ask the Lord's forgiveness through this following prayer of repentance for the Christians here. I think I'd like to ask you to stand as we say this prayer. From our hearts to our Father in heaven and to our Jewish friends here tonight, if you can recite with me. I recognize that for centuries the Christian church has been characterized by anti-Semitism, manifested in doctrines and words that negatively stereotype Jewish people, plus deeds of violence and murder against Jews. While not personally responsible for the past, as a Christian, I recognize my connection to the historic church and that we still suffer the consequences of its doctrines and deeds. Like Ezra and Daniel, who repented on behalf of all their people, I acknowledge, confess, and renounce the individual and corporate sins of the Christian church, and for myself, any sins of Judeophobia, the fear of Jews and things Jewish, anti-Semitism, attempts to stereotype, dehumanize, debase, belittle, and destroy the Jewish people, and silence and absence of protest against others who abuse the Jewish people. I confess the sins of our governmental leaders when they do not stand on the Lord's side concerning his divine purposes and will for the Jewish people and their biblical and historical rights to live in peace in the land given to them by the Almighty. I ask the Lord's forgiveness for any of these sins in my own life, and I commit myself to stand with Israel and the international Jewish community against any individual or corporate threat. I confess my identity with the Jewish people because of my faith in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. With help from the Almighty, I desire to bless, serve, and comfort the Lord's chosen people. Am Yisrael Chai, the Jewish people live. Amen. Now take a seat, please. Thank you. And I hope that these words from our heart will be a comfort to our Jewish friends here tonight, and Yael as she's representing the state of Israel. Now we're going to be moving along here, almost through. Thank you for your patience. There's a few more things to attend to as Cantor Probus is going to come lead us in singing the Hatikvah. Would you please stand, please?
Baleva felina, nefesh yehudi omida, fata mizrach kadima, ayin lezion sofia.
As we close here, I just want to thank all of you again so much for your love and support. We need one another, and please understand that in the days ahead, we're going to work as hard as we can to help continue to build relationships of love and understanding and mutual respect. I really don't see out here Jews and Christians. I see one company of people who are made in the image of God, who deserve love and honor and respect and dignity. And this is our commitment to all of you tonight. Rabbi Rosen, would you come and give a final word?
My friends, I've been studying the Holocaust for the better part of 25 years. I have read and read and read. I have read books and books and books, and I have shelves and shelves of magazines, of comprehensive histories, oral histories, analyses. I cannot explain how the Holocaust could have happened. I cannot explain how Kristallnacht could have happened. But I do know this. The Holocaust was born in a part of the world where Jews and Christians did not speak. Jews and Christians did not dialogue, debate, and discuss. It was not born in a world where even Christians spoke with one another, where the Greek Orthodox and the Roman Catholic could not sit at the same table, where Catholics and Protestants could not speak and overcome their differences. It was born in a world where there were no museums like our Holocaust Museum, museums where you learned the impact of hatred and intolerance and prejudice. It was born in a place where there were no places, no institutions like interfaith ministries, like the Coalition for Mutual Concern. It was born in a place where everyone had their own agenda, where people could not come together in one hall and sit together and affirm their belief in the one God. It was born in a place where, yes, there were very good Christians, but not enough of them who are prepared to stand up and say, as Richard Booker has said, we do not have to agree on theology in order to love one another. And if we cannot love one another, what good is our theology? Dear God, I wish we had had more men like Richard Booker. I wish we had had more women like Peggy Booker. I wish we had had more men and women like you. And because we have more men and women like you, we leave here tonight more hopeful than when we came in. And so it is my prayer that tonight, having shared this time together, we can all feel emboldened in our mission to continue to fight bigotry, prejudice, religious hatred, and find a way for us to continue the dialogue that has been brewing and growing and thriving in this country and in this community, and whose fruits we have shared in this service. May God be with us, may God strengthen us, and may God bring us true shalom. Amen.